Hey guys, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp, and of course, Scott is with us tonight. We were going to have a special guest. She could not make it, which is unfortunate. She was feeling under the weather, so just keep her in prayer. I think it's nothing terribly serious, but our prayers go out to Maria. I hope that she can join us again in the near future. But so tonight, what we're going to do is we are planning to take your questions about the end times. Okay, so anything related to the end times is fair game. Okay, personally, I like to stay away from Republican, Democratic politics. I don't especially enjoy that kind of stuff. But otherwise, fair game. I'd throw it out there, and we will take your questions. So, of course, my intrepid co-host Scott is with us this evening, and so we're looking forward to this. Always a lot of fun when we get to take your guys' questions, because people bring some really cool questions, don't you think?
Yeah. And we don't have all the answers.
Well, just as we're kind of getting into this, and we're waiting for some questions to pop up, because this is sort of a last-minute deal. But you and I have sort of been going back and forth about the 70th week, so-called, right? And I know sometimes I feel like maybe we are talking past each other. I think a lot of things in life we talk past each other and we're not listening. So I just want to make sure that I'm listening to you, and hopefully maybe you're listening to me on this particular topic. So you've expressed clearly, I think, that you believe the Great Tribulation is the last 3.5 years of this age, right?
Okay,
100%
yes, future.
Yes,
correct.
Yeah. So we agree on that point. Okay. You and I were raised with this teaching that talked about the tribulation as being the last 7 years of this age, and we both agree that that is technically incorrect. I would argue that there still is a 7-year period that is commonly, in a popular way, called the tribulation, because the first 3.5 years will be where the two witnesses will come. They will tell the world to repent, or else, in a nutshell, and the world will not be able to overcome them. The world will be sort of sitting ducks. These guys are going to bring all kinds of plagues and tribulation. Well, their own type of tribulation on the planet. We see that in Revelation chapter 11. And I would argue that those are parallel to what we see in the some of the trumpet judgments in Revelation chapter 8. So that's what I am seeing as, for 1,260 days, 42 months, those guys are going to be doing that. The beast then comes, kills them. I think that's going to happen at Passover. And then we go into the Great Tribulation. And that is where everyone is required to take the mark of the beast. That's when we have really scary creatures coming out of the abyss. This is when, the whole 666 thing gets going. And then we're leading up to this climax called the Battle of Armageddon. So that's how I see that. And I just don't know how we can have the two witnesses, assuming they're two guys, which is what I think, and the 42 months that the beast is going to get at the same time. I really think that they have to be two separate places. So I yield the floor, Scott.
Yeah, and if we go back to when we first started doing this together, probably 2.5 years ago, that is exactly the position I held at that time. I viewed the two witnesses more in a literal, like two prophets, and that they would testify in the first in that first 3.5 year period of the final 7 years. Now I just see that the two witnesses, not saying that there's not going to be two literal super prophets, if you will, but I do view them much more corporately, because they are the two olive trees. I believe it's the house of Judah that's had the testimony of the Torah, and then I believe it's the Christianity. During this final 3.5 year period, there will be this great tribulation, and it says it in Deuteronomy 4 that in the latter days, when you have this tribulation, that's when the purpose of the great tribulation is so his people will return to him. So I see us being the two witnesses, not necessarily the leaders of, if you will, of the two houses, but the two witnesses are the two olive trees, and I just believe they're corporate, and the two ecclesias, the two lampstands, and there's two assemblies that receive no judgment or condemnation from Yeshua, and it's the second and the sixth assembly, and I believe that. Again, I picked this up from Halisa, so it's not something I thought of. That would be related to unleavened bread and to Yom Teruah, and that's where when Maria gets on, she has an interesting understanding about Jacob and when it renamed Israel and the marriage of the two brides and the prophetic symbolism there, and how dispensationalism teaches that the church is going to be the bride of Christ, and then somehow the Jews and the tribulation saints end up being the bride of the Father or the wife of the Father.
Yeah, I know.
She does not have that view, but she does have that in that 10-day period between the gathering, when those that are of the faith are gathered and were transformed, that there will be a 10-day period for those alive that have not yet put their faith in Yeshua to enter into covenant, if you will. And so she can explain, I understand that, but she can explain it much better than me. But really what convinced me was the 3.5 days. I've asked a lot of people, not even being my normal obstinate, argumentative self, but show me anywhere in scripture where there is ever a 3.5 day period. And I just believe that's an example of the 3.5 days, the day for a year principle. And interesting, I talked to this gentleman again today, and we were just talking, and he's I think he'd be a very interesting guest, Doug. And he's the one that said that as far as the incantations, the cantillations, they're only used 3 times for the term Brit in the Masoretic text. And so he wants to talk about that. And he also brought up some interesting historicism type arguments. And I think it would be fascinating for the audience as far as certain things that happened based on historicism argument. And again, but I think we're both on the same page there, where we look as preterism is partially true, historicism is partially true, and futurism, a final future end, if you will, in which prophecy could be fulfilled 3, 4, even 5 different ways from different angles. It's like telescopic, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's real. I just believe it's going to be supernatural biblical in the final 3.5 years.
I mean, I do too, of course. And I think the two witnesses are a major part of the story that have been left out for the most part in our. Oh, okay. They've been left out for the most part in our eschatological discussions. And I see really the two witnesses as kind of being the center point, right? You got 22 chapters in Revelation, there in chapter 11. Everything seems to come to a head. For me, it was very beneficial to understand that the book of Revelation is not written chronologically. And so once I understood that we have themes that are placed in a sequence, but those themes may not necessarily come in that exact sequence. And so then it's our job to then kind of find where we can connect the dots and then see where those go. And so I agree with you that the two witnesses are representative of corporate things, but I would also argue that they are two individuals. And the argument that I would use is when we send a congressman or congresswoman to Congress, it's a real person, right? But they are supposedly representing my interests, right? And they represent a whole group of people. So that's what I think these two witnesses are going to do. But anyway, that's how I see it. We've got some questions coming in, which is, of course, awesome. So why don't we take this one? This is from the Sweet Pea 1971. How many, if any, of the 4 horsemen are currently riding? That's the next part of his question there. Scott, do you want to take that one first, or shall I? Because I think we may have different perspectives on that.
I can offer an opinion. I'm
Sure.
certainly not dogmatic on it, but I do believe that we might be seeing the first seal. I do believe was the CV-19er that was released upon the world, and the not AV that was.
Right.
And again, I don't think the first rider ever stops riding, if you will. I believe that if the second seal is open with what we're seeing in this West versus East proxy war, not only militarily between Russia and the West, but a lot of countries in the East, if you will, are starting to align with Russia. And then you see the economic wars that are starting to take place. So I would say that we're definitely not at the third seal yet. And if the second seal is open, it's barely cracked right now, except if you're living in Ukraine or you're one of the or you're in Russia and one of your kids is being sent up to the front. I mean, that would be very serious. I mean, it's easy for us to sit over here in America right now and not understand what's happening to the Ukrainians. I mean, for them, they probably think the second seal is definitely open. I do think it gets more global, though.
So cool. My opinion is different than Scott's, and that's all. That's all part of the fun. I do not think that we are in any of the seals, and I don't think that the vaccine had anything to do with the seals. I know Scott would argue very differently about that, but that's my perspective. So when I see that we got these four horsemen, when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he was had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So, in Corrupting the Image Volume 2, I showed how this was the ancient god Nergal. When we start looking at the different pictures, okay, I've got all the pictures on my computer. Since I wasn't expecting the question, I don't have it right in front of me. I'm just looking right now. I can pull it up. But when we see that the ancient iconography already showed us what this is going to look like. So think about, let's see. So, oh my goodness, my mind is blanking right now. It's terrible. One of the zodiacs, the centaur. What is that?
The bull,
Sorry,
the bull.
no, it's not
Centaur.
the
I'm
centaur.
not.
The man, the horseman, right? The Sagittarius. Yeah, Sagittarius. So so that basically that centaur Sagittarius is a much later stylized form of the ancient god Nergal, right? And we have this from about 3000 BC, from the time of the Sumerians, that they have this this creature that is that is talked about. It's going to come out of the abyss. In fact, I'm just going to pull up that picture, because this is really where a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay, so I want to show you guys this so that you just get a better sense of what's going on. So one second, let me just pull this up, and hopefully this will kind of make some sense for you. So, all right, so I made that bigger. Hopefully you guys can see that pretty well. All right, so this right here, this is from Uruk. This is from, I don't know, around roughly 3000 BC. All right, what do we see here? We see a man with a bow, right? It's a horse. He's on a horse. But this is an ancient symbol. This was known as, so this is Nergal. This is the god of death. You can see that he has a scorpion's tail back here. You can't see it in this one, but in another shot, he has a serpent head phallus. So that's just one of the interesting variations on this theme that was very extant in the ancient world. And so when we just start plugging in the iconography, I'm convinced that we are going to see something like this, somebody like this. Now, it may be symbolic at first, but when we see what is actually going to come out of the abyss, this is it. I mean, this is the very thing. Here's a variation on that theme. Hope you guys can see that one right now. So this is the Ansu bird. It's the same basic thing. It's just a different variation of it. But you can see it's a lion. It's got wings. Again, so there's just variations on this theme. But again, here it is. And whoops. So this is what I'm thinking is that we're going to see. And I don't think that I think this is representative of the Antichrist or the beast. And I don't think we have seen that yet. Now, again, all the things that, Scott's been talking about with the vaccine and all that stuff, could it be bricks in the wall? Sure. I'm fine with that. I think, all these things are going to become cumulative and it's going to add up to something really nasty. But I do not think that we have seen the seals open.
Well, we see the 4 altar judgments are plague or pestilence, and then war, famine, and wild beast. And the fourth rider sums up the first, if you will, the first 3 with the wild, and then again wild beasts, not lions and tigers and bears, oh my, but more like Hitler's, Stalin's, Caesar's, Antiochus Epiphanes, things of that nature. So when I look back, I mean, I'm pretty sure the second seal is war. The third seal is definitely famine, hyperinflation, if you will. So, So what is missing is the plague, the pestilence. And again, I don't think what we saw in 2020 was even close to what the head puppets have planned with future plans. I just believe it was a trial balloon, and then the Greek word for bow is toxone. And then, you start looking at some of the more recent symbolism. And again, I believe these puppet masters and what they control are occultic. They know who they worship. And you start looking at I think in the 1920s, the symbol for the Council on Foreign Relations is a rider on a white horse. You start looking at the symbols for the UN and for the WHO, and surrounding the symbol is a crown, a corona, a wreath, a Stephanos, if you will, that is on the WHO symbol. It's on the UN symbol. And so, and again, if now that things have semi-calmed down for now, people are forgetting just how much it affected the world for that 6 months, year, 2 years, and how much division and everything it caused. So again, if they ever release a new strain or some type of different bioengineered virus, you can only imagine what type of control. And they know, in other words, I'm marked now already, although I don't have the mark of the beast. I'm already marked clearly as one of these people that did not take their recommendations. So I think they now have a data list of individuals, like myself, who will not comply. So,
all right.
I'm sitting here publicly saying it. So, I mean, obviously I'm not too concerned.
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah.
All right. Ed has an important question. Will there be mosquitoes in the New Jerusalem? I hate mosquitoes.
I don't know.
Well, of course we don't know, but I'm suspicious that they probably will be, but I think they will not be the nasty little suckers that they are right now. So that would be my speculation, but we'll have to wait and see, Brother Ed. All right. This is from Sweet Pea. It is said that 2045 will be the year of the singularity. Do you believe they will achieve this? And if so, how does this fit prophecy? Yeah. So I wrote a whole book on that. If you are interested, it's this one right here. It's an amazing book. I really recommend it. So check it out. And coming soon here, Regenesis Code. Oh, it's going to be so exciting. You can get the advanced copy of that, by the way. So just put that in Regenesis Code in Amazon and you can get the advanced copy. So please do. So, okay, the question again was, will 2045 be the singularity? Well, of course, we don't know if that's going to be the year. That is the year that Ray Kurzweil and other futurists, transhumanists, believe that we will achieve this thing called the singularity. What is the singularity, you might ask? This is when you have a complete merging between man and technology, or man and machine. And according to them, it is when man reaches transcendence and he's no longer a transhuman, but he becomes a post-human. That's the goal. Okay, so transhumanism is where we are now, according to them, that we are in a transitional period of becoming something greater than being human. According to them, it's when man becomes his own God. And that's what they have stated as such, that they believe that it's our destiny to become gods, and we're going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and become gods.
Become immortal.
And become immortal, right? And so that's what they're thinking. Now, it's interesting when we plug in their numbers with a possible scenario from the Bible, right? So that the generation that sees the budding of the victory, in my opinion, is 1948. 2048 would be 100 years from that, and that could be the interpretation of a generation. Again, I'm talking very carefully because we do not know, but the numbers are just fun to kind of play with a little bit. So you back up 3.5 years from that, that would put you at 2045, and that would put us right in at that time, right? So, again, we're kind of playing with their numbers a little bit, sort of plugging them into the Bible and saying, well, maybe, okay. Is it going to happen then? I have no idea, guys. So I'm not telling you to sell the farm or cash out your cash or anything, your stocks and bonds. Like I have no idea. All right, but it's interesting to speculate about where we might be in this whole thing. So will they achieve it? Well, I think they will if, again, we plug it into the biblical interpretation of that term. Singularity meaning the abomination that causes desolation, and that everyone needs to take the mark of the beast in order to buy or sell, I would say yes. And the Bible just gives us a brief bullet point about what that's going to be. If we start thinking about the implications of a worldwide system where you have some kind of mark on you and you cannot buy or sell without this particular mark, that's a huge endeavor. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of technology and planning that goes into creating such a thing, and it's not going to be created overnight. It's going to take years and years of great products that will come before it until it all, goes to pot and it turns into something that's really not very good at all. So I think it's at least plausible that we could have the singularity by 2045. Ray Kurzweil is a very intelligent man, and he has predicted many things very accurately. So I don't see any reason why he would be wrong in this case. So if that happens, I'm not going to be surprised. If it doesn't, well, then, Ray Kurzweil is not God. So that's my take.
There, with the level that AI has increased just here recently in the past year,
Yep.
I would say that Ray might actually be, 12-ish to 15-year-ish to 17-year-ish years, in the future of when it happens. I mean, I don't watch hardly any TV. I watch John Haller's prophecy update to get a lot of this information, but I did watch a little bit of the interview based on John's recommendation, actually, with Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. And, I think Elon's playing his part, but he was talking about the competitor is the competitor called Elon a speciesist. In other words, the Google guys wanting to develop this, they have no problems with AI becoming like a god, if you will. And so if it was on Tucker Carlson the last 2 nights, or either Tuesday and Wednesday night, but where Elon was saying that this is very, very dangerous. I mean, and I believe predictive programming, guys. I believe the adversary has to tell us what he's going to be doing. And you've got movies like The Terminator, which seem to be just science fiction, but as AI is growing and as the people that are actually intelligent in this area, they are very concerned about what could happen if AI becomes, if you will, self-aware with no consciousness. So it could happen sooner rather than later. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking here at the next question. This is from Ed, he says, how do those outside the gate during the millennium achieve salvation? So, good question, Ed. I think Revelation 22 pretty much gives us the answer. And he showed
Same
me,
way Abraham did, and we do.
yeah.
I'm not
So, and
joking.
he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and from the Lamb and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street, and on either side of the river, was a tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Okay, so they're for the healing of the nations. All right, so then let's plug this in here to verse 14. Blessed are those who do his commandments or wash their garments, depending on how you read that, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. All right, so we have that. Let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 47, I believe it is. All right, so we have this river. It's coming out from the threshold, and wherever the river went, things are healed. He says this water flows toward the eastern region. When it reaches the sea, its waters are healed, and it shall be that every living thing that moves wherever the rivers go will live. There will be a very great multitude of fish because these waters go there, for they will be healed, and everything will live wherever the river goes.
It's
Now,
like
notice,
Eden.
yeah, along the bank of the river on this side and that will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. They will be bear fruit every month because their water flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for medicine. So they're exactly the same thing. These are parallel passages that we have here, and what I understand is that you're going to have the river of life coming down from the New Jerusalem. It's going to spread out into the world, and you need to wash your garments or keep the commandments. There's a translation issue there in Revelation 22, but depending, it's kind of the same thing at the end of the day, right?
Same thing.
You wash your garments, you keep the commandments. It's the same deal, right? And so for people that are mortal, they need to take of the river of life. That cleanses them. But then there's one more step. They have to take from the tree of life, the leaves from the tree of life. And what do those leaves do? They heal people. All right. Now it's interesting when God back in the garden, he said, hey, look, man's now become like one of us, knowing good and evil, but lest he stretch out his hand and live forever. And it says, and the Lord drove him out of the garden. So it's like, wait a second. Why couldn't he have just taken from the tree of life? Why was that such a bad thing? Well, because man became corrupted. Man died the moment that he ate of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He died. Now, he didn't keel over, right? But death entered into his body. He began dying, and it was just a matter of time until his body finally gave up the ghost. But he was already a dead man walking. The moment he took that thing, the poison entered him, whatever it was, as an analogy, the poison entered him, and that was that. All right. So had he taken of the tree of life at that moment, he would have been an eternally walking zombie. Okay. And God didn't want that. So God had to, of course, send his son, do all these amazing things to redeem us and then give us the opportunity to get a new body. So the people that are born during the millennium do not yet have their new body. They will have the opportunity. And as Scott said, it'll be the same way that everybody else does it. It's through faith. But instead of them sort of believing that Jesus did this thing, Jesus will be on the planet. They can walk up to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And they can be obedient right then and there. Now
There
we do it by faith, by something we can't see, but by then it'll be you can go and do it and see it. And that will be that.
Atheism won't exist in the millennium.
Right.
I mean, in other words, the king will be on the throne. So there won't be any atheists in the millennium. But, I mean, it's going to be by faith. And again, if we just, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but, Abraham demonstrated his faith. Abraham exercised his faith. I think it's Genesis 26:5 when it's talking, that he kept the statutes, the mitzvah, the commandments, the Torah. In other words, it's always salvation has always been by faith. And you pointed out the verse earlier. It's going to be those who keep the commandments that are going to be able to partake of this tree of life, the waters, the healing from the leaves, if you will. And those who choose to still live in sin, the dogs are out, they're outside the city. Now, whether or not their life is shortened because of their rebellion and they don't live to be 100, from I think that's from some of the Isaiah passages, and then that's possible that there will be death in the millennium. So I'm assuming there are going to be some that do rebel. It just shows our sin nature, even though we have perfect, righteous ruling and reigning on the throne.
Mhm.
And I like to say this at that point in time, and the bride, certain people then servants will be ruling and reigning with Yeshua, and it'll be perfect justice when it comes, if it ever gets up to King Yeshua, because unlike our modern day judges, they don't have people testifying, don't have a green light. That's the 100% truth. A red light, that person is lying through their teeth, or a yellow light. They're not telling the whole truth, but they're not flat out lying. And that's why I don't envy judges in this, right now in our civil justice, our criminal justice system, having to make decisions like that. So, but it'll be perfect righteous rule during the seventh day.
Yes, well said. So Norma, I don't know, question or comment. It says he will cut the days short, but I guess the jury's out about how many days it will be short, not specified. So looks like an internal question. Yeah, so I talk about that in Corrupting the Image Volume 3. I think for the elect's sake, um, is really talking about those who are the leadership of Jerusalem, that they're going to finally come to the realization of who Yeshua is. And I would dare argue that no matter how many times we pray, "Oh Lord, come," he's not coming. And I think Jesus gave us he gave us in Matthew 23. He didn't give us, but he told the leadership of Jerusalem. He says, "Hey, look, you know what? Your house is left to you desolate, and I say to you, you shall not see me until," he says, "from now until you say, Baruch Hashem, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai," right? Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Well, those people are all dead, right? So how could it be that he told them, "I'm not coming until you say this"? I think he's talking about the leadership, not those specific men, but a specific group. The group known as the Sanhedrin, the leadership, whatever you want to call them, the ones who are in Jerusalem. And I think this is very much a Jewish thing, all right? Even though I'm all for the house of Israel, house of Judah, and all that stuff. But I think this is where the lawgiver shall not depart from Judah, right? And that God has a plan with Judah as well as with the house of Israel. But in this case, the guys that make the call will be from the house of Judah. They will be in Jerusalem. And only when they say, "Oh, well, we missed it. Oh, my." And then they say, "Baruch haba b'shem Adonai," to Jesus, then and only then will Jesus come back. That's my take on it.
Cool.
So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I'm in alignment with you on that, Doug. As far as I like to say, the last four chapters of Zechariah are almost exclusively Judah centric, and that's why I do believe what happened in 1948 with the circumstances that occurred was setting the stage, like a prerequisite for prophecy to be fulfilled. I don't believe it fulfilled that nation being born in a day yet. I believe that happens at the seventh day, the last day at the resurrection, when all of the Israel and the elect are gathered from the four corners. And to your point, I believe that's when Judah, many that are still rejecting Yeshua as Messiah, when that event happens, they will see the sign of the Son of Man. They will actually look upon him whom they pierced. They'll see him. And then they've got that 10-day period between Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, and Yom Kippurim, in which Judah will be miraculously saved. As all hope seems lost, they will then cry out, and I believe it's then on Yom Kippurim when Yeshua touches down, actually sets foot on the Mount of Olives, and it splits. In other words, I believe there is this 10-day period, and we can look at some of the passages in Revelation where it talks about 10 days of tribulation. I believe that is to the second assembly, and that they will, Judah will, like you say, the leadership, the Sanhedrin, the people in the land at that time, a third will be saved through this judgment and this, as the nations gather against them. So I think that's when it is cut short, is at that future Yom Teruah, which kicks off the seventh day, and he's just built in so many witnesses. Now, again, there's some arguments can be made, like we talked about recently with Tony, about is there going to be a some living at the time that are sealed and specially protected, the 144, or perhaps even a harpazo, a catching up prior to the end. That's a possibility that for those individuals, some will be supernaturally protected in the wilderness and sealed, just like those 1,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel that went to war against the Midianites. You do not survive war that many years ago, close combat war, and not one man die. And so I believe what happens in the Great Tribulation, it's going to be supernatural, biblical, spiritual type of war, as opposed to people with their AK, 47s or their AR-15s and their stockpiles of weapons defending their land against this beast system. So I think any preppers, once we get to the final 3.5 years, your prepping time is over at that point in time.
Yeah, fair enough. This is from Ruth. She says, what is the earth that the false prophet rises up out of, as opposed to the sea that the beast rises out of?
You go first.
I was going to give that one to you. That's a great question, Ruth. And I dare say it is very tricky. And I don't know that I really have a good answer for it. So then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. All right, so we've seen this, right? And I've talked about this before, that we've seen some kind of creature like this in the ancient literature. All right. This is basically known as the Ansu bird, or Enlil, or the Mushushu, or the Bashmu, all variations on a theme, Satan. All right. And what's interesting is it's actually Nimrod and Satan, and they merge at some point. And so that's both a solution, but also a challenge, because it's difficult to try to figure out who are we talking about. But we see that these two have some very clear similarities, right? The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So there was basically a Hydra type creature way before the Greeks ever thought of it. Okay, but it was a 7-headed serpent, a dragon serpent kind of thing, and one of its heads was wounded. I mean, this is from the ancient world, right? So we already have all this iconography. And again, it goes back to Enlil, to Ninurta, who is Nimrod. Enlil, of course, is Satan. And what's interesting in the ancient world, that Enlil was known as the father of Ninurta. And it's said that Enlil gave his power, throne, and his authority to Ninurta. And so Ninurta held the tablet of destinies. And whoever held the tablet of destinies was the sovereign over the affairs of man. Why would Enlil give Ninurta his power, throne, and authority? Well, because Ninurta was doing the bidding of Enlil, and really they became one and the same. Ninurta was the physical embodiment of Enlil, and Enlil was the spiritual powerhouse behind Ninurta. So that's what we have. Now we compare and contrast this. Okay, so you have this beast that's rising up out of the sea versus a beast that is rising up out of the earth. All right, so sea in this case, right here in the first verse, probably the sea is a reference to some type of a cosmic, different spiritual domain. Okay, and that's would be my take on it. That the beast that rises up out of the sea is the beast, the Antichrist, whoever you want to call him, some reincarnation in a sense of Ninurta, and then he is going to merge spiritually and genetically with Enlil. And then the next beast will be one that will probably be one of the first people, probably the first person, to take this new hybridized DNA of the beast, and he will have a very special position. So out of the earth, I would argue, is referring to the general population of mankind. All right. So there's still some mysteries we don't know. Certainly the book of Revelation is a challenging book. I love it. I love to study it, but I don't understand every last symbol. Scott, anything you want to add?
I believe, yeah, I believe the sea represents the nations, the peoples, the tribes. That and I can't recall the scripture reference off my head, but generally speaking, Revelation with its symbols, the code is unlocked somewhere else in scripture. Sometimes the code is given to you in Revelation. Back to the two witnesses, it said they're the two olive trees. So then you have to go on a biblical rabbit trail to find out what the olive trees were and are, and then you have to find out what the two lampstands. And we're told what the lampstands are. That they're the seven assemblies. But as to the sea, I believe that this beast arises up out of the nations. And again, but later on we do have the beast coming from the abyss, and that's where I believe the beast is right now. Now, whether or not he takes on an image of a man that arises up out of the nations and the peoples, that's a maybe a different question. But I see we have some people. Yeah, I mean, again, as Eric is commenting, he's talking about an SDA teaching that the beast of the sea is Rome, the Rome is the Antichrist, and the beast of the earth is the USA. I mean, again, there can certainly be some good arguments made. Again, we don't have all this figured out, but I personally believe the second beast, the false prophet, that my best candidate right now, it has been and will be, and unless the Vatican gets wiped off the face of the earth and Roman Catholicism no longer ceases to be the mother of harlots, is going to be whoever the vicar is at that time. So I believe that the beast of the earth arises up out of this false apostate system. And again, I'm not talking about individual Catholics, but the system as a whole is straight from hell. So.
All right. Another question. This is a comment. Just want to say that the 7 consequences corrected the cross from the Way congregation this past Shabbat was awesome. Go Doug. Well, thank you, Nate. I appreciate that. Very much appreciate it. All right. So this is John. At what point of Revelation 22:18 becomes dangerous to Christians when talking about Revelation adding or taking away from the book?
I think anytime. That's one of my really big pet peeves when our pre-trib brothers and sisters will add the term tribulation saints to Revelation. The Greek word just says hagios, holy, set apart ones. They are not called some special thalipsis saints or tribulation saints. And I do believe, and again, Eric, this is not anything at you, but yes, no doubt we see in scripture that the beasts are kingdoms, but we also see in Revelation that the beast is currently under lock and key in the abyss. So a lot of times once a system has been developed, people will adhere to that system and ignore other scripture. Like, for instance, when it specifically says the beast is in the abyss under lock and key right now, and they will argue that it's just Rome or it's just America. And they've been making the same arguments now since the 1840s. But the problem is they may be correct in what they're saying, but then disregarding other parts of Revelation and all of Scripture is the way I look at it. Systems are good, but once you get locked into one, then you just can't think outside of that box.
So sometimes there's different ways to look at things, Scott. And
exactly,
it could be that the beast is in the abyss, but it could be that this is also a description of who this beast is, right? So in Revelation 11:7, when they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit. So rather than seeing this as he's doing it at that moment kind of event, this is more a predicate explaining what kind of beast is there, or is this, right? If you could say, I met the guy that walked on the moon. It doesn't mean I met him when he was walking on the moon. It means that I met the guy that, years earlier got to walk on the moon. And that I'm using as a predicate to describe something that he's known for. We have the same issue. I'll just point this one out. This is in Revelation chapter 20, where it's talking about Jesus, or that Jesus is the one on the great white throne, because the Father has given him all judgment. All right, so I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away. So this right here, the word fled is in the aorist tense. The aorist can be past. It can be past perfect. And so you could easily put in the word had fled away. And I think that makes a lot more sense, because when did heaven and earth flee away from his face? Well, when he came back. And we see that the apocalypse of Jesus, the unveiling of Jesus, is when the heavens are going to recede like a scroll and the earth is going to begin to melt with fervent heat. So that is when the heavens are going to flee from his face. So it's not at the moment in Revelation 20 when John sees this whole thing, but he's using that as a description about the one who sits on the throne. And this thing happened in relationship to the one that sits on the throne. That is, sometime earlier, about 1,000 years earlier, the heavens and earth had fled away.
I'm referring to Revelation 17:8. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go into destruction. And the beast and the second beast, the false prophet, are cast into the lake of fire. And again, I don't see how a kingdom or a country, this seems to be individual. And again, I believe a lot of what SDA and historicism teaches is true. They're just pigeonholed themselves into historicism and pigeonholed themselves into Ellen G. White's prophecy from 150 years ago, and they aren't necessarily willing to look at it any other way. Is my point to that. But I do believe this is a thing, an entity that's currently under lock and key. And to your point, about the Nimrod and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, again, it's entirely plausible when you start looking at it was, it is not, it will be again. And right. I believe Revelation was written around 90 to 95 AD. So at least at that point in time, this beast, even though Rome was still the beast kingdom, and we're still in Rome. I mean, the fourth beast, Gentile, Goy, pagan empire system has never been crushed yet. In other words, Jua has not returned and crushed that Daniel 2 statue into dust yet. I mean,
this is where I really think we have to go back to Babylon, because what's interesting about the seven kingdoms is they all conquered Babylon, or were Babylon. Okay, so the first one was obviously Babylon. And then the other ones conquered Babylon. Now, Rome didn't spend a lot of time in Babylon, but they did actually conquer the area. and Babylon wasn't really much of anything. But what's interesting is that by the time Rome had conquered Babylon, Babylon had already conquered the world. And I don't mean militarily, but I mean culturally, spiritually, culturally, right? All of the false gods, where do they come from? Straight from Babylon, right?
Well,
So,
look at Roman
and the beast that
Catholicism.
was, I would argue the beast that was Nimrod. Nimrod means let's rebel. In the ancient world, he was called Ninurta. He was the son of Enlil, and he lived for a long time. We don't know how long he lived. Nimrod died at some point, and I think whether it's that particular individual or it's the spirit of or the essence of or the genes, the genetics of Nimrod, one of those is going to be embodied in this person that we know as the beast, right? And again, one of the things that I was looking at in Corrupting the Image Volume 2, I kept wondering, why do we have these particular epithets of Satan? Why is he called the Great Red Dragon? Well, guess what? I went back and I found in the ancient literature the Mushhushu, which was a dragon. You could find it on the Ishtar Gate, currently located in East Berlin. You can go to that museum and you can see the Ishtar Gate, and you can see the Mushhushu dragon that was displayed on those gates. And that's just a variation of the dragon that I already showed earlier, the Anzu bird, the Mushhushu. Mushhushu in Hebrew probably comes out as Nachash, which is, of course, snake, which is Satan that we find in the garden. So it's just a variation on a theme. And that Nimrod became a Gibor. He began to be a Gibor, right? Something changed in Nimrod. And he I don't think his parents named him Nimrod. I just don't think that's hey, let's rebel, come here. I just don't think that makes any sense. But you start tracing Nimrod into the ancient world, and you take the letters Mem, Resh, Dalet, which is let's rebel, Marad. And what do you get? You get Marduk. Ooh, that's interesting, right? You get the god Amartu, right? All these variations are all the same thing. Even Ninurta is the same letters when you start looking at it. They're all the same basic name because it's from Nimrod. And so I think, again, whether it's that particular guy or if it's that spirit, his genes, whatever it may be, that is what's going to come back in the ancient world.
Well, and again, to agree with you and what Eric is posting here, Rome fell and the Catholic Church took its place. I 100% agree. It became the Holy Roman Empire, and we are still living in the remnants of this Holy Roman Empire. And there's no doubt that the Vatican is the mother of harlots with her syncretic mixture of religion. And again, the protesters, the reformers were correct. The Pope is Antichrist. I just where Eric, where I would differ with Miss White would be, I believe that the beast is a supernatural entity that's only unveiled and revealed at the very end, and that the second beast would be the Pope. And how it all unfolds, I don't know. I think that the Vatican is going to come out and say, we've been hiding all this information. You can all be Christ. This is Yeshua. In other words, he's going to point that this is the person you need to be worshiping, and we can become just like him. That's how I kind of see this unfolding. And again, this spiritual adultery, this false religion is called Mystery Babylon, and Rome corrupted the faith. And sadly, the protesting daughters still follow Mama on certain issues. And again, it's in the genes, it's in the DNA. The house of Israel likes to create idols. Look at what Jeroboam did. The house of Israel loves to have special priesthood or a special clergy, or people elevated above with like even the Baptists, but you're ordained. And then don't even get me started on how God hates the feast of the house of Israel. Then and now, Christianity, he pukes on these things. I'm sorry, everybody. And what's happening now, prophecy is being fulfilled because people's eyes and ears are opening up. This past year, I heard reports and personal witness testimony of people beginning to at least see about the importance of Passover and keeping unleavened bread for the first time ever, and coming, starting to honor the Shabbat. And it's like a dress rehearsal. It's a practice for what's coming, and it's exciting to see this. This is the good news of prophecy. People are returning to His way and His truth, and they're abandoning the whore. They're leaving Mystery Babylon. They're not leaving Yeshua. They're not leaving the sound doctrines that the church does have, but they're tossing the vain traditions, and that's good news.
Yeah. Michael asks if the red heifer is sacrificed on Passover 2024, and then the daily sacrifice starts up on Pentecost 2024. 2,300 days later is Trumpets 2030. Thoughts?
Very interesting. And again, there's a movie out now called Messiah 2030, which I believe that would be an example. And the guy I talked with today that I want to have on as a guest, that these prophecies, and that's where the SDA got it totally wrong. They were predicting Yeshua was going to return. They used the 2,300 day for a year principle, and they were saying, by golly, Jesus is coming back in 1843. No, it's 1844. And then they couldn't really fudge any further than that. I think they could have given themselves another year or two, but he still didn't come back. And then they came up with the investigative judgment. But again, that could very well be an instance, and I forget the connection that I know the guy that did the movie. I'm just not going to say his name right now, but he made an interesting connection on the 2,300 and divided by the 50 Jubilees and the 46 years. Remember when the Jews said it took 46 years to build this temple, where if you multiply 46 by a 50-year Jubilee cycle, you get 2,300. So, and the gentleman I was talking to today, I think his name's Rick, he was showing some interesting things that happen from a historicism view. And so what I see is their preterism is partially true. Historicism and what SDA and the other historicists teach is partially true, but also the partial and ultimate futurism is true. So that is very intriguing if that were to happen. Next Passover. And again, I'm watching every appointed time. I'm actually going to be in Israel for the Feast of Tabernacles this next fall. And it's going to be interesting to see if anything major unfolds. I mean, I'm just watching anytime the appointed times come up and the feasts come up as we're approaching the end of this second day, the end of this sixth day since Adam. I think we all need to be watching. That's what Yeshua says. Be sober, be alert, stay in repentance, and be watchful. And that was a prayer answered about 2 years ago. I had 5 prayers supernaturally answered, and I was really kind of freaking out about, hey, if we're really getting close to the end, what am I going to do for my family and my friends? I couldn't sleep. You didn't get to sleep till like 7 or 8 in the morning. I went to bed with like Matthew playing in my head early that morning. I woke up at 11 and it was on Luke 21. It was either Luke 17 or Luke 21, where it was like, stay sober, stay vigilant, be watchful, be prayerful that you can escape all these things. So,
yeah. And speaking of Israel, we are taking a trip. The Way Congregation's taking a trip to Israel, April 7th through the 18th, 2024. You can go to thewaycongregation.com to get information. Go with us. It's going to be great. It is filling up. So there's still space, but it is filling up. So make sure you get over there and sign up right away. It's going to be great. Israel is such an incredible place. All right. M says, is it clear in Scripture whether all believers will be serving in the millennium with Jesus, or is it only some believers? Scott, I think you have a pretty strong opinion on that one.
Yeah, I think that the bride will be the overcomers, if you will be sort of the upper echelon ruling and reign. We are that I say we, I'm not going to put myself in that we category, but the bride, those chosen, will be the, I guess, the ultimate authority up under Yeshua, obviously. But then there will also be servants. I mean, there are those that serve Yeshua who aren't necessarily going to be chosen as the bride. And then there's others, even when we start to look at these parables, at the wedding feast, friend, where are your wedding clothes? He doesn't say off to you, you're going to burn your lake of fire time for you. So I believe just as we see in the Torah, there was Moses, and then there was Aaron and Joshua, and then you had the heads of tens of thousands, and you had the heads of 1,000, you had the head of 100, and you had the head of 10. The kingdom is not going to be this communist system that we've been taught and we all grew up being teaching that everyone is the bride and everyone is equal in Jesus. No, it's going to be rewards. Paul talks about how a lot gets burned up. There are certain rewards that are going to be given, and I believe how we've stewarded and managed our gifts in this age is the test. We're in a testing ground, and Yah's not going to put people in charge of judging that let's say in this age, a Torah terrorist who is like, well, you don't keep Sabbath, so therefore you're going to burn in hell, or you didn't keep Passover. And I went on, not a rant earlier, but it's just true. But punch me in the face if I put myself on the throne to say, because you're not doing these things, that you're not going to be in the kingdom. But Yeshua is very clear. Those who teach that his law was abolished, even the jots and the tittles, will be least in the kingdom. Those that keep it and teach others to keep it will be greatest in the kingdom. So Yeshua makes a distinction about our kingdom status. And again, if I can be just the ditch digger or the window cleaner, again, he's making the choice, not me. So
I think you bring up some great points. So yeah, let's do the best we can now. All right. Could the Mayan god Quetzalcoatl, never learn how to spell that, was the seraphim Enlil incarnate that visited the Mayans and gave them their prophetic calendar? He's depicted as a winged serpent. Whether he visited physically, I don't know, but how did the ancient Babylonians and Sumerians get the information and the revelations about this winged serpent? I don't know that they met him, out in the fields or something like that. I think they were going through some kind of a spiritual ritual. Think of, pentagrams and circles and candles and all that. Basically that kind of stuff. Seance, necromancers, wizards, sorcerers, witches, all those people in one way or another are tapping into the spiritual realm. And I think they see things. So I think the people that were in the Mayan culture were doing the same thing, right? So again, I don't know that Satan went there physically and he showed up like, hey, here I am. I think that they were tapping into that same dark occult realm and they saw the same things. They interpreted it a little bit different. They called it the winged serpent, Quetzalcoatl. But I would argue that, yes, it is the same entity. So I totally agree.
You see the same imagery in Asia. I mean, again, this is not, when you start looking at I do like, there's like a Netflix series where the guy talks about an ancient apocalypse and everything. And he goes into some of these ancient mysteries and these temples and even some of the, I mean, again, it's more for entertainment value, but when you start looking at some of the symbols of the ancient astronauts and they will show how, like you've been doing, Doug, in your research in your books, how this winged dragon over in China or in Burma or in Africa is the same exact winged dragon over in the Americas. So again, these false gods, I believe they're real Elohim, but they're lesser created gods, if you will. And yeah, they've been manifesting in the past, and I believe that's what happens at the very end of the age when they're cast down and and others are led out of the abyss. That all these myths that we've read about, I believe it gets real. I believe it gets completely biblical, and it's going to freak people out. So
indeed it is. So Gavin has a question. are the two witnesses not bringing their witness during the second half of the future 70th week? Is the tribulation witness too much for them, like it is for our pre-trib friends? Go ahead, Scott.
The two witnesses are testifying in the final 3.5 years, my friend Gavin. There is no future 70th week, though. So we've had that discussion many, many times.
Well, and so this is where I would disagree with Scott. I believe, and we'll all find out in the end, right? But I think the two witnesses are bringing their message during that first half of that 70th week, not the second half. So I really see that at the midpoint of the 70th week is when the beast comes to power. That's when the abomination of desolation occurs. And I think it's at that point when he goes in to declare himself to be God, showing that he is a God, if you will, when he boasts that he just killed the two witnesses. I think the world's gonna be like, oh, wow, okay. And I think because the incredible power of the two witnesses was so dramatic, when the beast is able to kill them, and nobody was able to kill them because they were able to bring plagues on the earth and as often as they desired. When he's finally able to kill them, the world's gonna be like, oh, wow, you were really, really powerful. And then they're going to say, who can make war with the beast? Because, this is actually showing how incredibly powerful he is. And I think the two witnesses are going to be received by the world as hostile aliens because they come with a message from some god from who knows where that doesn't seem to like humanity very much. And he's telling us all to, bend the knee to him and all that. And so I think, they will see them as aliens, and then the saviors such as Enlil and all the demons will be regarded as aliens as well. So that's how I put it together. And I know that Scott and I see it differently, but that is how I see it.
And I would argue from, you use that term a lot. I would say that if we look back at the period of Elijah, when he is testifying against Baal, when he's hidden out for those 3.5 years, that's just an example. In other words, I think that's a prophetic type, and he's in the wilderness. He's basically hid in a rock, and but he did obviously also have after that. That is when, after that hideout period, when he actually confronted Jezebel and the prophets of Baal, and there was the showdown, where I think that's the best form of sarcasm used in the Bible, when he said, maybe he's in the bathroom. But I do see that 3.5 year period, and Elijah very well could be, I believe Elijah and Moses, they appeared with Yeshua at the Mount of Transfiguration. I would say they're the best candidates. The other third candidate would be perhaps Enoch, if it's a literal return of two prophets as well as the corporate body, which is, again, I don't discount what you believe and teach, Doug, that it could be two literal, just like Ephraim received the firstborn blessing, and Judah received the royal blessing, as our friend Gavin likes to say. There were two special prophecies given to them, and there could also be, out of these two olive trees, the house of Judah and the house of Israel, and Elijah was a Tishbite. So, Moses was a Levite. So, John the Baptist is a potential candidate, I guess, because he came in the spirit of Elijah. And he was I guess he was a Levite too, but would have been known from the house of Judah because he was obviously in the land years, when Yeshua was there. And that everybody at that point in time, whether they descended from Asher or wherever, Chronicles records how many who didn't want to follow the apostate ways of Jeroboam, and most of the Levites migrated south, and they got subsumed by the house of Judah, but the majority got scattered, smothered, covered like Waffle House.
Yeah. So pretty much the ancient rabbinic opinion was that it would be Moses and Elijah, and that's why I think Moses and Elijah actually show up on the Mount of Transfiguration, because we know that obviously Jesus has two comings, and they both showed up at the first coming, just like was believed. But of course, that was not the judgment coming. So I think they're going to be the ones that come again. But another question: are we assuming the church is the house of Israel? Wow. So
I
Anthony
believe.
asked that, and
Yeah,
it's a big question, right? But
I believe so.
yeah, I do too. I do too. And Scott and I, and Gavin, and Ed, Doug Krieger, and Chris Steinley. Did I forget anybody? John Luca.
Gianluca.
We belong to a foundation that we started called the Commonwealth of Israel Foundation, and we've come up with a new heresy, which is called Commonwealth theology. We don't think it's a heresy, but I'm sure some people do. But we really think that it makes much more sense that the big story that we have in Scripture is the restoration of the United Kingdom of Israel. And as we've alluded to, here and there, we have many teachings on this. I have a lot of teachings. If you want to check out God's Divorce and Remarriage, I think that will really help to solidify a lot of things, God's Divorce and Remarriage. But basically, in a nutshell, okay, and I'm going to give you a very brief overview. When you had the United Kingdom, God and the United Kingdom got married. They then got divorced. Of course, they split in two. God said, no more mercy to the northern kingdom of Israel, but yes, mercy to the house of Judah. And then he said to the northern kingdom of Israel, you're not my wife anymore. I'm not your husband. You're not my people. I'm not your God. Get out. And then he said, but one day I'm going to betroth you to me in righteousness forever. So that was resolved through the cross because the husband, which is God, Jesus, died, and thereby releasing her from the handwriting of ordinances that was against her or against us, and allows us to come back. So what happened to the house of Israel? They were scattered, sent away, assimilated into the nations, into the Gentiles. And for them to come back is us coming into faith. That's when we come into faith as a Gentile. We come into faith. And then guess what? We're no longer Gentiles. We were of the Gentiles, right? You former Gentiles, right, have now been brought into the Commonwealth of Israel. And that's what Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 2. So yes, I guess we wouldn't assume we don't think it's an assumption, but we think that it's pretty well spelled out.
It's the mystery of the gospel of the kingdom that 99% of Christianity has never, ever even heard. Right. And Yeshua, speaking of prophecy in Matthew 24, he talks about when this gospel of the kingdom is proclaimed to the nations, to the Gentiles, then the timing is near. And back what I talked about Deuteronomy 4 and Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 4, it talks about when you've disobeyed, when I've scattered you to the nations. And that was not just Judah. Judah was one tribe at that time. And you will return to my ways. And when you return to my ways, and it's both Deuteronomy 4 and 30, that's when he's going to gather all of Israel, which would include Judah, no doubt, from the nations. We have the gathering. We have Isaiah 11 when it talks about, how gather you for a second time. And it will make what happened at the first Exodus pale in comparison. And I believe there will be a supernatural, by golly, no doubt, gathering of the elect, not only from the four corners of the earth, but at the resurrection when this event occurs. Now, whether or not there is a preceding gathering, like the original Exodus, I wouldn't dogmatically teach it, and I wouldn't dogmatically teach against it. If a cloud shows up and manna starts falling out from heaven, and it picks up one day, and I'm going to follow it. I'll put it that way. So.
Yeah, a couple more questions here. We're getting close out of time. I think the Shroud of Turin and cloning may be a great deception. What do you think? I don't know. Some days I'm like, oh yeah, the Shroud of Turin is absolutely legit. And some days I'm like, I don't know. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I think there's a lot of evidence that it could be legit, but I don't have a dog in that race. This is a comment. Nimrod became a Gibor by selling out to Hasatan to become the most powerful kingdom. He was filled with rebellious spirit. I agree with that. This is Anthony. Messiah 2030 is fantastic. Doug and Scott, can you two find anything off in that presentation? I have not watched it, but I would say that anytime we put a date on he's coming at this time.
And he was very clear at the outset. He was just using that for, in other words, I've spoken to the gentleman that produced it. I just can't say his name right now. And there's a reason for that. But he also understands that our Roman calendar could be a year or 2 or 3 off. So he's not date setting 2030. Unless our Roman calendar is way off, then the wiggle room, and from talking to him, is 2027 to 2033, 2034. And because then, 99.99% of people that have researched this, and scholars, both secular and biblical, would say that Yeshua, up to a 99.999%, nobody puts his ascension prior to 26 AD. Nobody puts it after 36 AD. So there's your 10-year window. Most would say it's between 28 and 33 AD. So that is, so again, he's very clear that he's not predicting, that 2030 is definitely the year. He's more teaching on this 6-day Hosea 5:15, 6:1 and 2 about, Yah would return to his place. Yeshua, Jesus, would return to his place. And Dub, I say Yeshua because that's what his mom and daddy called him. Yeshua means salvation. If we're going to transliterate anything, we should be calling him Joshua and not Jesus. But I don't do name arguments with Christians or with Hebrew uprooters. So just you call our Savior what you want to call him, and I'll call what I want to call him. And why don't we just leave it at that?
There you go. This is from William. What is the criteria for the status of something or someone to be a god? So is our imagination all that is required to determine if someone or something is a god? I suppose that is in relation to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where it says that he'll go into the temple declaring himself to be God and showing himself that he's God. Well, here's what I would suggest is that the word God, if we take it back to Hebrew, Elohim, it just means mighty one. Okay, so a mighty one from the biblical definition would be an angelic type being. All right, and I say type because it doesn't have to be specifically, like Michael or Gabriel. But it's the same.
Is called an Elohim.
The what?
The Samuel spirit that the witch at Endor called up, that Saul asked her to call up, that word is actually Elohim. In other words, so like a disembodied spirit, if you will. Heiser has some good teachings on this, I believe. I differ with him a little bit, but again, Samuel's spirit is called an Elohim. It's called a God.
Right. Yeah. It is called a god, and sometimes that can be used as a judge, and sometimes it's used for mighty beings. So, we're not using, and the Bible's not using the word, God with a little g. It's not using, not that you have capitals and minuscules, but it's not using the word God in the sense that, like the creator God who made everything in heaven and earth and has innate power, right? Satan does not have innate power. He has given power, right? He has given abilities, and so do these other beings. So, and he gets to operate within, whatever, abilities or limitations that he has. So for a man to become a god, he somehow has to be transformed. This is, as I see it, I think there's going to be a genetic transformation of this person. And he's gonna be changed, and he'll take on the essence of Satan, and then he'll give this essence to all humanity through a genetic transformation. So that would be my take on it. But yeah, so anyway, boy, that's about it. What do you think, Scott? Do we?
I mean, again, if you got another question, we can take one more. But I mean, it's
all right. Let me
some
see
of the
here.
stuff some of the questions I think we can really address with Maria, and then maybe with this gentleman I spoke with today. Very, very nice guy. He's been a prophecy geek his whole life, so I think he'll be an interesting guest to have.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We're glad that you gave us some fantastic questions to chew on. Those were a lot of fun. And as you can see, Scott and I agree on some things. We don't agree on everything. And that really is all part of the fun. It's part of the discovery process. And, I'm sure I'll be coming around to some of his point of views, and he might be coming around to some of mine. And that's how we learn. And so if you disagree with somebody on prophecy, just relax. Okay. Jesus is going to work it all out. He'll come back and he's going to set us all straight when he comes.
So we're gonna have so much wrong, and guess what? Our kingdom status. Now, again, I do believe he is pleased, and it's the glory of kings to search out a matter, and he is pleased when people take a serious interest in his word. I believe he gets very displeased because we don't have perfect knowledge, we don't have perfect understanding, we don't have perfect wisdom. And if you think you do, you have a pride problem. And I want you to go to the graveyards and raise a bunch of dead people and start walking across water, because then you're just, heal everybody that you choose to do so with the Spirit. And that's why when we differ on something, and yet we can agree on the fundamentals, then I think that's when the Father, when Yeshua is not pleased. Is when you start dividing with people. Again, I've said this before. I won't discuss prophecy with the 70 AD preterists. We just need to talk about something else. But again, we can agree to disagree. I will discuss prophecy like with SDAs, and I'll just point blank say I believe you're wrong on this. But that's okay. I wouldn't break fellowship with them. We would sit down and have a meal. We could agree to disagree. We could argue. We could midrash. We could debate. We could even fuss, so long as no person gets angry or gets their little feelings hurt. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I just want to remind you guys, the Regenesis Code is on Amazon for pre-order. So get the book. You're going to love it. Well, I'm kind of biased, but I think you're going to love it. Regenesis Code. We're going to have 4 books in the series. I am so excited about it. And I think you're going to really enjoy the story. So again, thanks. We're glad that you joined us.